Masechet Avoda Zara Daf Ayin. We are going to analyze about 10 different cases where a non-Jew was found alone with wine that belonged to a Jew, and we suspect that maybe while he was alone with the wine, he made a libation. However, each and every one of these cases is going to be ruled by Rava leniently for one reason or another. Here's number one. There was a house where a Jew's wine was stored in this storehouse. A non-Jew entered and locked the door. So this is a problem. He's locked with the wine inside. The Jew cannot come in order to check on him. So now we're going to be suspicious. But here's the thing. There was a crack in the door. And there were barrels that were opposite the crack. In other words, if you look through the crack, you can see some of the barrels, although there's other barrels that are on the side that cannot be seen through the crack. So, what do we do? Rava said, any barrels that are opposite the crack that could be seen, if someone looked through the crack, those are permitted because we assume that the non-Jew knows that those are in the line of sight of the crack and someone outside would be able to see it. And so he would be afraid to open up those barrels because the Jew who owns them or another Jew might look in the crack and see him opening some barrels that don't belong to him. And so then they would tell him. So he wouldn't do that. But the other barrels that are on this side or on that side of the crack that cannot be seen, then those are prohibited. Asur. Second case. Israel. There was a two-story house, and in this house, there was wine that belonged to a Jew that was stored on the lower level, and a Jew lived on the upper level, while a non-Jew lived on the lower level. So normally, the non-Jew is not going to touch the wine that's on the same floor where he is, because the Jew upstairs is always coming in and coming out, so he's always afraid at any point that his Jewish upstairs neighbor might be passing through and will see him. So therefore, generally, that wine is going to be permitted. However, one time, Shema'u kol tigra nafki kadim ata goy achda ledasha be'apeh. One time, they heard some quarreling outside, and so everybody in this house went outside to see what was going on. And then they went back in. But it's the non-Jew went in first, and he locked the door behind him, and the Jew was still outside. However, the non-Jew didn't know whether the Jew was inside or outside when he locked the door. Maybe because there was a quarrel, he wanted to lock the door so none of the hooligans come in. So the question is that since the non-Jew locked the door, does that make the wine inside prohibited? Because now he's not going to be afraid to open up the barrels. Amar Rava, chamra sharem emar amar, ki hechi dekadim atay ana, kadem ve'atay Yisrael ve'yati be'alyona, ve'kach hazi li. And Rava says the wine is permitted because the non-Jew will think to himself, just like I came in quickly, so too probably the Jew also already came in. He didn't want to be part of the fighting outside, so he might have come in before me, and he's upstairs. Since the non-Jew doesn't know. In fact, the non-Jew came in first and locked the Jew out. But the non-Jew didn't know that. And since he didn't know that, he would have been afraid that the Jew might have been upstairs and could come down at any time. So he would not touch the wine. Third story. One time there was an inn, and a Jew had wine stored at the inn. And there was a non-Jew that was sitting among the barrels, and he was alone with the barrels. So, doesn't that make them prohibited? Amar Rava, imnit pasalav keganav shareh v'ila asir. Rava said it depends. If the non-Jew there, if someone saw him there, would he be caught and feel like a thief? And in that such a case, it's permitted because that non-Jew is not at ease. He's not going to sit. It takes time to open the barrel and take the wine and seal it up again. And so if he has no reason being there, no excuse to be there, and if someone saw him, they'd say, you're a thief. What are you doing here? Then you don't have to worry. Then the wine is kosher. But if he wouldn't be seen as a thief if he was there, in other words, if he has a reason, he has an excuse to be there. Someone comes and says, what are you doing here? And he says, I work here. I have wine here. I'm cleaning up, whatever it is. So that if he has a reason to be there, then he's not going to be afraid to hang out there. And then he would feel free to open a barrel and make a libation. And so therefore, in that case, it would be prohibited. Fourth case. There was a house and wine of a Jew was stored there. And someone saw that a non-Jew was standing among the barrels, and he was alone with the wine, so maybe it should be prohibited. Amar Rava, similar to the previous case, Rava says, if he has a reason to be there, if he has an excuse, then it's prohibited, because since he has a reason to be there, he feels comfortable and he would take the time and open barrels. But if he has no excuse, no reason to be there, then the wine is permitted because he's afraid he's going to be caught at any time. Me'tibe, a challenge against Rava. Ninala pundak o shamar lo shemor asur. My lav afagav delet leish tamute. We have a beraita that teaches that if there was wine in an inn and it was locked by the non-Jew, or if the Jew was there and the Jew said, I'm leaving, watch my wine for me, by saying, please safeguard my wine, it's the same as if the Jew is saying, I'm going on a long trip, which we know back from the Mishnah, makes the wine prohibited if the non-Jew thinks that he's leaving for a while. And so here also, when he says, safeguard my wine, it means I'm going away, I'm not coming back very soon, I need you to watch it. So in both of these cases, the wine is prohibited. Now, what are the circumstances? Isn't it the circumstances where the non-Jew does not have an excuse to be there? And even though he doesn't have an excuse and would feel comfortable, nevertheless it says prohibited, challenge against Rava. And we answer simply, La b'di'it le'ish tamuteh. No, this baraita is only talking about a case where the non-Jew does have an excuse to be there. His excuse might be, oh, the Jew told me to watch it, whatever. Or he lives there. He works there, he has a reason to be there, and that's why it's prohibited. He will feel comfortable even inside. I mean, the Jew might have told him to watch it from the outside, but he has some reason that he should be inside also. In such a case, the wine is prohibited. Hahu Yisrael, fifth case, Vegoy, Tavu Yetibi Veka Shatu Chamra. A Jew and a non-Jew were sitting together and drinking wine. Shema Yisrael Kal Saluye Bekenishta. Kam Vazal. The Jew heard that they were praying. It was nearby the Bet Knesset. He heard the Chazan, right, start saying, Ashrei Yoshe Bebetecha. So he wants to go, and he gets up and prays. Amar Rava Chamra Shareh. Now, the Jew left the non-Jew at the table with the wine on the table. So it seems that we should assume that the non-Jew is going to touch and libate the wine on the table. It's all open and available right there. But Rava says, no, the wine is permitted. Why? The non-Jew will say, surely he doesn't know where the Jew went. And he doesn't know how long, maybe he knows that he went to pray, but he doesn't know how long the prayer is, if it's a fast chazan, a slow chazan. Is it Rosh Chodesh today? They're going to pray longer? He doesn't know. And so the non-Jew thinks to himself, well, he just got up and left, but surely he's going to remember his wine that he left behind, and he's going to come right back. And so the non-Jew assumes that the Jew may come back at any moment, and he's careful not to touch the wine. Next case, Ahu Yisrael Vegoy. Tavu Yetibi Be'arba. One time, there was a Jew and a non-Jew that were sitting on a ship together. Shema Yisrael Kal Shipure, Tebe Shimshe, Nefak Va'azal. And the Jew heard the sound of the shofar announcing that Shabbat is starting. And he didn't want to be on the boat the whole Shabbat. The boat is docked. And so he doesn't want to be on the boat the whole Shabbat. So he got up and left because he wants to be on land during Shabbat. And now there's wine that's on the boat. What do we do? So now the Jew left, and we know that the Jew's not going to go back on the boat on Shabbat. So really, it's alone with the non-Jew for a long time. So it seems that that wine should be prohibited. However, Amar Rava Chamra Shareh Amar Hashta Midecharle Lechamre V'Hadad Ate. No, the wine is permitted because the non-Jew is not familiar with all the laws of Shabbat, and he assumes that this Jew, I don't know, he just went to get something, and maybe he forgot about his wine, but surely he's going to remember his wine, and he's going to come back and get it. And he might come back at any moment, maybe in 1 minute, maybe in 5 minutes, and so therefore the non-Jew is not going to touch it. Now, about this case, if you say, wait, doesn't the non-Jew know that this is Shabbat for the Jew? And he'll know that the Jew is not going to come back on the boat on Shabbat, and therefore should be prohibited. But you don't have to worry about that, because Ha'amar Rava, Amar li Isur Giyura. Rava says that this guy named Isur, who was a convert, so because he was a non-Jew, he can report accurately what the non-Jews think about the Jews and their observance of Shabbat. And this convert, Isur, reported, Ki havenan be'aramiyutan amrinan. When we were still Arameans, not Jew, before converting, we used to say, Yehuda the Jews don't really keep Shabbat. They look like they're keeping Shabbat, but they don't really keep Shabbat. Because if the Jews really kept Shabbat sincerely, then we would surely find many wallets in the marketplace. In other words, that when Shabbat starts, sometimes, there's Jews that are still in the marketplace, and when they would hear the shofar, if they really kept Shabbat, they would immediately have to drop their wallets and go home, go to shul, and wouldn't be able to carry their wallets. And no one, if they forgot their wallet somewhere, they wouldn't be able to go right back and get it. And so if they really kept Shabbat, then we would find wallets of Jews all over the marketplace. And we don't find them. So that proves that, in fact, the Jews are secretly not keeping Shabbat. They forget their wallet somewhere, or Shabbat starts right away, and they didn't realize, they didn't prepare, they didn't get home, and they're in the middle of the marketplace, and they don't leave their wallet there, they carry it home. So you see that the Jews don't keep Shabbat. Therefore, this guy also on the boat will say, I know the Jew left, and I know it is Shabbat, and I know the rule is that a Jew is not allowed to enter onto a boat on Shabbat, but he assumes that Jews don't keep Shabbat, because that's what the non-Jews generally think. They don't think that Jews really keep Shabbat, and so, because, according to Rava, the non-Jews think that the Jews don't really keep Shabbat, that's why he's afraid that he thinks that the Jew will come at any moment back onto the boat. And now the truth is, how come there are no wallets in the marketplace? How come it's not full of wallets? Because indeed, the Jews would be hanging around there till close to sunset, and then all of a sudden sunset comes, and they won't realize, and so they should be wallets that are left there by Jews. So where'd they all go? And the answer is V'layadana despiralan ke Rabbi Yitzchak. The Rabbi Yitzchak amoseh kis b'Shabbat molicho pachot machot me'arba amot. And we didn't know that the halacha follows Rabbi Yitzchak, because Rabbi Yitzchak said, if someone finds a wallet on Shabbat, he is not allowed to carry, because it's Reshut Harabim, so you can't carry it more than 4 amot. But what you can do is move it less than 4 amot, put it down. Pick it up, move it less than 4 amot, put it down. As long as you move it 3.5 amot at a time. So this is a leniency because it's a wallet. There's going to be hefsed gadol, and so by doing it this way, so then you're not violating a deoraita, and the rabbis are going to be lenient so that people will not come to violate Shabbat even worse. And so that's why there's no wallets around, because if someone does forget their wallet, or all of a sudden it's sunset, they didn't realize and they have their wallet there, they will get it to safety by doing this, picking it up and putting it down every 3.5 amot, and that's why there's no wallets. But really, the Jews indeed do keep Shabbat. Yes, there are some loopholes. It's a legal loophole that you can use to save your wallet. That's why there's no wallets. But really, Jews keep Shabbat. And so even though this Jew, really, the Jew knows that he's not going to get back on the boat, but Rava knows that the non-Jew thinks that the Jew may come back onto the boat at any time. All right, 7th story. One time there was a lion that roared at the wine press, and there was a non-Jew there. He got scared, so he ran and hid among the barrels. And so now you have a non-Jew alone with the barrels. So while this lion is walking around, maybe the non-Jew, maybe he wants to get good luck to be saved from the lion. So he might open a barrel and bring yayin nesech. And so all the barrels should be prohibited, right? Amar Rava, chamra shareh, Amar Amar ki hechi de tashena ana, it sha name Yisrael achorai v'kach hazili. No, the non-Jew will think to himself, just like I'm hiding among the barrels, it's very likely that there was a Jew also walking around in this area, and he also went and hid behind the barrel, and he might be, nearby, and watching me, and he'll see me if I open a barrel. And so the non-Jew will be scared, and therefore the barrels are permitted. Eighth story, Hahonhu gannabe de salki lepumpedita, uftachu chabita tuba, amar Rava chamra share, mai ta'ama, ruba gannabe Yisrael ninhu. One time, there were a bunch of thieves that came to Pumpedita, and they opened a lot of barrels of wine. So now you have all these thieves opening barrels. Shouldn't we assume that these are idolatrous thieves, and they're opening the barrels and making them yayin nesech, so they should be prohibited? And Rava says, no, the wine is permitted. Why? Because most of the thieves in Pumbedita are Jews. What do you know? Okay, they're Jewish thieves. So although they're thieves, but they don't do yayin nesech. They're monotheistic thieves. And this is interesting because Rava was not actually from Pumbedita. He was from Machoza. So you wonder if Rava is giving a bit of a dig to the people of Pumbedita, where the Jews that live there are thieves. Or maybe these came from elsewhere. I don't know. But anyway, Avoda bin Nehar De'ah, V'amar Shemuel Chamra Shareh. There was a similar case in Nehar De'ah, and Shemuel, in fact, was the rabbi in Nehar De'ah, and he also said that the wine is permitted, presumably for the same reason, that although there were many barrels opened by thieves, but we assume that the thieves, in fact, were Jewish. So, although it's terrible that there are Jewish thieves, but at least the wine is kosher. Keman. And now we ask, this ruling of Shemuel, who does he follow? Because he doesn't know for sure if these thieves that came in were Jewish or if they were idolaters. So why did he assume that it's permitted? And the answer is he's following Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer. Amar safek bi'ah tahor. Rabbi Eliezer in the following Mishnah says, if one is not sure whether one even entered into the area to begin with, then we assume tahor. Here's the circumstances. Ditnan, a Mishnah in Teharot. Someone goes into a valley in the rainy season. Now that's a time when hardly anybody would go into a valley in the rainy season. So it's considered private domain. When you have safek tumah in a private domain, we assume lechumra that the person that went there is tameh. And there is, in fact, we know there's some tumah in a certain field in that area. Ve'amar halachti b'makom halaz ve'niyodeh im nichnasti lo tasadeh im lo nichnasti. A certain person who was tahor says, I went to that area, but I'm not sure if I went to that particular field, or maybe I didn't go to that field at all. Rabbi Eliezer omer safek bi'at tahor, safek maga tameh. Rabbi Eliezer says, if he doesn't even know if he went to that field at all, then even though it's a private domain, because he's not sure if he even was in the area, I mean, he was in the general area, but if he doesn't know if he even entered that field, therefore, tahor. Now, if he knows he entered the field, but is not sure if he actually touched that source of tumah, that's when we say, oh, it's a private domain, and he is tameh. But if he's not sure if he ever entered into it, then it is tahor. And we can apply the same law here. These thieves, they came in. Now, if we know that they were for sure idolaters, and they came in, we don't know for sure if, when they opened the barrels, they made libations. That we're not sure about. But if we knew that they were idolaters, then we would have to assume that they did make libations and it would be prohibited. But here, we're not even sure if they were idolaters who entered. Maybe these were Jewish thieves that entered. And so since we have a safek bi'ah, a doubt whether idolaters entered into that space of the wine at all, that's why Shemuel ruled tahor in this case. Isn't that right? That Shemuel is following Rabbi Eliezer, and we say no, not necessarily. La the reason why Shemuel was lenient is because there are some thieves that open barrels because they want to find money. And that's why they opened the barrels, not because they wanted to make libations. And therefore, we have a double doubt. Number one, these thieves might be Jewish. And if they're Jewish, then even if they open the barrels to drink and everything, that's totally fine. They're thieves, but they're Jewish, so they don't make yayin nesech. And the other safek is, even if they are idolaters, maybe they opened all of these barrels because they were looking for wine hidden inside, and their intention was not to make yayin nesech, and that reason also would be permitted, and that's the reason, not because Shemuel necessarily follows the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Next case of Rava's rulings, Hahi revita de ishtakach tehavat, Bedane vava nikita ufya bidaha. There was a young girl who was not Jewish, and she was found among the barrels of wine, and she had some froth, wine froth, in her hand. Well, that seems like she must have dipped her hand into a barrel, and the barrel would be prohibited then. Rava said here also, the wine is permitted because it could be that she got the froth from outside the barrel, bubbled up outside the barrel, and she took some of the froth, but she did not touch the wine in the barrel. And even if we go inside and we see there is no froth right now on the outside of the barrel, but it could be that when she was there happened to be froth there, and she took it, and there's none left. But so just because there's none anymore doesn't mean that there was none when she came in. And so we assume for the best that she took from on top of the barrel, outside the barrel, and did not put her hand in the barrel. One time there was an invading army, Pulmus, that came into the city of Nehar De'ah, and they opened a lot of barrels of wine. So seems like we would have to assume that it's not kosher. Ki ata Rav Dimi amar obada hava kamed Rabbi Elazar ushra. When Rav Dimi came, he says there was an exact case just like this in front of Rabbi Elazar, and he says it's permitted. Now, why did Rabbi Elazar say it's permitted? Velayadana imishum desabar la Rabbi Eliezer damar sefek bi'at tahor imishum desabar ubada azle behadeh pulmusa Yisrael ninhu. And we weren't sure whether Rabbi Elazar said it was permitted in that case. Was it because he follows the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that says if you're not sure if someone entered into a certain area or not, then you can assume that the person is tahor. In the case of the field with the valley, we'll see in this paragraph in a second how that would apply to this case. Or maybe Rabbi Eliezer was permissive in this case because he said that it could be that most of the people in this army were Jews. And so if it was Jews and they opened all the barrels, then it would be totally fine. Okay, so we're not sure if it's A or B. Now B we understand, but A, if you're following Rabbi Eliezer, hai sefek bi'a, sefek magahu. Is this a doubt whether they came in? We know they came in. They were here. They were opening the barrels. And the second possibility was that they're Jews. So the first possibility means that they're non-Jews. So these are non-Jews. And they know that came with this army. And we know that they definitely came in. So this is rather a doubt whether they touched the wine or not. They came in. They're non-Jews. They opened the barrels. We just don't know whether they touched the wine. And Rabbi Eliezer said that's prohibited in Sefek Maga. And so the answer is Kevan de mi fatechi tuba emadata de mamona petachu vechisvek biadame. Since they opened so many barrels, we should assume that they opened the barrels to look for money. And since they were looking for money and not with intention to make yayin nesech, it's permitted as if it was a safek of bi'ah. If they were really wanted the wine, they would just open a few of them and drink the wine. They wouldn't open all of them, so many of them. And so if they're opening so many, then it means that we can assume that, or we have at least a doubt about why they opened it in the first place. So that's like safek bi'ah. Hahi masobita the masrala iklida maftecha legoya. One time there was a woman who owned a wine shop, and she gave the key over to a non-Jew to watch for her. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Obada hava b'midrashav amru lo misarala ela shemirat mafteach bilbad. So they asked the question. It seems like it would be prohibited because she's saying, here, watch this for me, and then the Jew goes away. So shouldn't we suspect that the non-Jew might have taken the key and opened up and made some of the wine yayin nesech? So Rabbi Yitzchak says, name Rabbi Elazar, we had a case just like this discussed in the Bet Midrash, and we concluded that the Jew only gave over the key to watch the key, didn't give authorization to enter into the store. I'm just like, listen, I'm going away. Just watch the key so that I don't want to lose it. I don't want to take it with me. I don't want anybody to find it and go and steal and open it up. So she's not giving her the key to open up, and therefore she has no right to open up. And if she would open up and be inside, and then she would look like a thief. And so in that case, she would be afraid to enter in, and therefore the wine remains kosher. אמר אביי, אף עננה מתננה, המוסר מפתחות לעם הארץ, טהרותיו טהורות. לפי שלא מסר לו אלא שמירת מפתח בלבד. Abaye said, we can learn this from a Mishnah in Masechet Taharot also, that if someone gives keys to his storehouse to an Am Haaretz, and in his storehouse he has food that was tahor, and he gives the key to an Amaris. Now, if the Amaris would go in and touch things, then it would become Tameh. But his Taharot remain Tahor. Why? Because the Chaver only gave over the keys to the Amaretz to watch the key, not to have a right to go into the storehouse. So this is the same thing. Hashta Taharot Yeterot Yenesech Mibaya. Now, if this is true, that we can be lenient in a case of Taharot, and Taharot right now we're assuming are stringent, then for Yayin Nesech, which is a more lenient law, all the more so we can rule leniently. Now we ask, Lemema de Taharot Alima, Miyen Nesech, are you telling me that Taharot are generally more stringent than Yayin Nesech? Wouldn't you think the opposite? Because here we made a Kal Vachomer. If you can permit in Taharot, which is stringent, all the more so you can permit in Yayin Nesech. So is that true? And we answer yes, indeed, Taharot is more stringent than Yayin Nesech in the following source, Itmar. If you have a courtyard that's owned by two people, and you divided the courtyard with a low partition, just a low row of some stones, a simple partition that's easy to walk over it, but still it's an indicator, a border indicator, and you have Taharot on one side and Tum'ah on the other side. Amarav Taharotav Temeot. You have a Jew who's careful with Tahor things on one side. You have an Amaretz on the other side. So the Amaretz can easily reach over and touch the food of the Chaver. So what do we say? Rav says, yes, we have to assume that the Amaretz will reach over and touch the food, because it's not a high wall that's going to stop him, so it's tameh. Ubegoy eno oseh yenesech. However, according to Rav, if it's not a Chaved and a Amaretz, but rather a Jew and a non-Jew, then the non-Jew will not make the wine on the other side yayin nesech. So in other words, according to Rav, for the case of Tuman Tahara, we're stringent, more stringent than regarding Yayin Nesech, where we do not assume that the non-Jew is going to reach over and touch the wine. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Af Taharotav Tehorot. Rabbi Yochanan says we can be lenient on both accounts, and that the Amar is not going to reach across. But the proof is from Rav, because if you are going to make a distinction, you see Rav says that Teharot are more stringent than Yayin Nesech. Me Tibeh. Challenge against Rav. הפנימית של חבר וחיצונה של עם הארץ, אותו חבר שוטח שם פירות ומניח שם כלים, ואף על פי שידו של עם הארץ מגעת לשם, קשיא לרב. We have a braita that says, if there's an inner courtyard that belongs to a chaver, and he has tahor things in his inner courtyard. Now, the guy outside is the Am Haaretz, and the Am Haaretz, he has no reason to go into the inner courtyard, because, right, it was the other way around. Then the inner courtyard has to pass through the outer courtyard. So if the Am Haaretz was inside, he would have a reason to pass through. But in this case, the Am Haaretz has no reason to enter into the inner courtyard. So the Baraita teaches that the Chaver who's inside can take all of his produce, his fruit, and put it out and to dry out in the field, or he could put his vessels there, and even though it's within a hand's reach, an arm length of the Am Haaretz, and he can just reach from his outer courtyard to the inner courtyard and touch it, it's permitted. So here we see that although there's when there's two sides, unlike Rav, who said regarding Taharot, they are tameh when there's a low partition in between. In this case, Rav said that it's tahor, and we assume that the Am Haaretz is not going to reach across. So we have a contradiction. Amar lach Rav shanei hatam shnitpas alav kaganav. Rav says no, that case is different, because if Am Haaretz tries to reach his hand out, he'll be seen as a thief. What are you doing? Why are you putting your hand into my courtyard? You're on the outer courtyard. You want to go somewhere? Go out. You have no excuse to reach your hand inside. And therefore, since he will be seen as a thief, he'll be afraid and he's not going to put his hand in. That's not the same when it's a shared courtyard side by side, when there may be a reason that he has to do something on the other side, and he won't be seen as a thief. He'll say, oh, I'm here because whatever, I have to pass through, I have to do something. And so in this case, since he's not scared to reach his hand across, he very well may. And so we assume it's tahor. But when it's an outer courtyard reaching into an inner courtyard, then he'll be seen as a thief and he won't do it. Tashema. רבן שמעון בן גמליאל אומר, גגו של חבר למעלה מגגו של עם הארץ, אותו חבר שוטח שם פירות ומניח שם כלים, ובלבד שלא תהא ידו של עם הארץ מגעת לשם, קשיא לרבי יוחנן. And now we have a challenge against Rabbi Yochanan. It would be a proof for Rav, where Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel rules that if you have two roofs that are side by side, but one's a little bit higher than the other, so it's that the roof of the chaver is a little bit higher than the roof of the Amaretz. Now you can reach up. The Amaretz can reach up and reach up to the higher roof of the chaver. Now that chaver, he wants to put out fruit to dry out in the sun or put his vessels there. It's permitted as long as the arm of the Amaretz cannot reach. In other words, if it can't reach, well, obviously that's permitted. That means if it can reach, if it is within reach, then it is prohibited. There's a proof for Rav, because Rav said, just like if you have a low partition side by side, it's prohibited because he can reach over. Here also, it's only a little bit higher, but the Amaretz can reach up and touch it, then it's prohibited. Proof for Rav, challenge to Rabbi Yochanan, who was lenient. אמר לך רבי יוחנן, שנה אתם דאיתלה לאיש תמותה. ואמר אמר, אם סורה כממסרה. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, the case of the roofs is different because the Amaretz, who's lower down, has an excuse. He says, well, what were you doing? Why were you putting your hand up there? And he says, oh, I was only stretching. I went up to the roof. I want to do some stretching, some exercises, and I happened to be near your roof, so it looked like I was trying to touch your fruit. No, I wasn't. I was just stretching. And he won't be afraid to go there because he has an excuse. He says, yeah, I was doing exercise up here. And that's why, in that case of the two roofs, we say it's tameh, because he has an easy excuse. But when it's side by side, when if someone comes and sees, what are you doing putting your arm over there? And now he doesn't have so much of an excuse. He can't just say, I'm stretching. Why are you stretching that way, sideways? Doesn't make sense. And so therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, when it's side by side on the floor with the low partition, then it's permitted because the Amaretz will be afraid to reach over to the other side. Rav will continue with his position and use the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel as a proof because he doesn't have to give this reasoning that Rabbi Yochanan just said. And so Rav is about to say, Rashbag, yes, he is on my side. Now, Tashema, that same B'raita has another ruling, and this one's going to be a challenge against Rav. Gago shel chaver besad gago shel Amaretz. You have two roofs that are side by side, equal. One's of a chaver, one's of an Amaretz. Oto chaver shoter sham perot umaner sham kelim. V'af al pi sheyado shel Amaretz magat lesham. The chaver can put his produce out there to dry, or he can put vessels out there, and even though the Amaretz can easily reach over and touch the produce or touch those vessels, it's permitted. So that's permitted like Rabbi Yochanan. Challenge against Rav, who said in a very similar case that's prohibited when it's in a courtyard with a low partition. That seems to be the same thing as this case. Amar lach Rav, lav ika Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, teka'e kevati ana, Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav says, indeed, you're right. This part of the Braita would be a challenge to me, but I have a Rashbag on my side, right over here. Rashbag followed, it was the same as what I said, so I followed the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Indeed, yet there is another Tana that disagrees, but that's not a challenge to me. I don't have to agree with every Tana. I follow Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.